Ahoy, you salty sailors. Time to raise anchor and set sail for your best scrawny life. Arr!
Alright, we are on the South Skunk River just north of Ames, and we are praying for rain. The river level is still very low, although the flow would have stopped last summer during the peak of the drought, the driest part, just leaving a few interconnected pools, unconnected pools. So we've had some snow melt, a little bit of, just a touch of rain, but this is not looking good. I did see some midges, not very many, hatching this day, and no stoneflies. Now it's possible, of course, that there just weren't any hatching that day for their own particular reasons, but it's quite possible that the drought has impacted the food web all the way down to the base of the food web. Now this is a secondary pool. I was not in good enough condition to hike to one of the major bend pools on this river, but it's a decent secondary pool, and certainly one that's held smallmouth bass and suckers and so forth in the past, even during dry years. But there was nothing in this pool except striped shiners. Not even creek chubs. There was no bass, no suckers, nothing in this pool but striped shiners. Very concerning. Certainly, some of the population, I believe, has been impacted. There's a striped shiner for those who don't know what it is. Just a minnow, basically. But yes, as I hiked along, I looked at all the secondary pockets and pools I could find, and a lot of them had no fish at all, or they just had shiners, and that was it. Well, certainly, you'd expect to see a sucker or something besides that, but no. So there is cause for concern, and drought whining will probably be a feature of this video. And as I'm speaking, there is still major low pressure over the Pacific Ocean. There's no sign of La Nina. So anyway, if you were a beaver, would you just attack a random hackberry tree? And they didn't even get what they wanted out of it. Goodness, that's got to be hard on the teeth. But let's have a closer look at one of the food web events of this time of year on the rivers, which is the hatching of midges and stoneflies. So midges are aquatic insects of the order Diptera, the two-winged insects. So they would be related to things like crane flies, mosquitoes, gnats, and so forth. But they have their own order, their own family, order Diptera, family Chironomidae. The stoneflies, on the other hand, are a larger insect, but less populous, and belonging to the order Plecoptera. The larvae of these, the midges, of course, have a rather short life cycle, but the larva of the stoneflies is a more important food source for fish and other residents of the river. They will tend to crawl out of the river when they hatch, and the adult form, they'll then mate, of course, on the riverbanks, and the adult form then returns to the river and sort of skates over the water as it lays its eggs. But it's a longer-lived insect in general, although the exact species that we have around here I'm also uncertain of. So here's a nice cloud of midges. This is the Middle Raccoon River near the town of Panora. So at least the base of the food web is a bit more intact here, although the stoneflies weren't quite as numerous as what I was expecting to find. However, this secondary bend pool is one that held a large school of carp packed in here the last time I was here, and I was hoping to find carp rising to stoneflies or slurping midges in there this day, but there were no signs of life besides the insects themselves. And that's a pattern that generally is fairly predictable this time of year. You've heard me speak of other times where I've fished for carp during the day, and that's this midge and stonefly pattern that we're talking about. And then during the evening at this time of the year, switching over to investigating the walleye run. But there's none of that going on at this level. And some might think that, well, losing a school of carp from this river wouldn't be a big deal, but they're the last ones to go. If the carp population is impacted, then the smallmouth and the walleyes and the suckers that they depend on have been severely impacted. This river is also one that the flow stopped during the driest part of last summer. So there have been impacts, severe impacts of the drought on this river, and there is cause for concern about the fish populations. Here's the dam in Panora. Notice there's no one else here fishing, and the water only just a trickle coming over the dam, so we are in bad shape, and we are praying for rain here in Iowa. A little cancer update here. My last meeting, treatment seems to be going pretty well. They've reduced some of the medicine, and I've been able to eat a little bit more spicy food without getting that heartburn. I'm pretty much able to walk without any assistance. If I took a hike in some really rugged terrain, I'd probably use a walking stick, but that would be normal for someone my age. Not back on the bicycle just yet, but been able to do some exercise. I was lying in bed listening to a reading of Gorin no Sho, wherein Miyamoto-san begins with the statement, "The way of the warrior is the resolute acceptance of death." And of course there's a parallel statement that Jesus made when he says, "If anyone would be my disciple, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me." And with the mention of the cross, it's clear that it's not simply a call to abandoning carnal ambitions or a call to a life of self-sacrifice, but that it is in fact a call to the resolute acceptance of death. And the reason why is made clear in the next verse when he says, "What does it profit a person if they gain the whole world but lose their own soul?" And that is, of course, the key difference between Stoicism and Epicureanism. Belief in immaterial persons. The Epicurean, the one who lives under the idea, let us eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, is a materialist. The idea that hardship as a means of personal improvement doesn't make any sense to them because they don't believe in a personal continuance. Whether or not there is in fact such a thing as a soul, is belief in it necessary for mental health? is the philosophical lemon drop I'll leave you with until next time. So we'll be using this type of frozen noodles for our dish. We'll get those started softening up in some boiling water here. Since they're fresh noodles, it will not take long. It's not like dry pasta or anything. Don't want to overcook them and turn them mushy. This plant is called tan-o. I don't know the English name, other than that the Latin for it is Chrysanthemum coronarium. So it is in the Asteraceae, the composite flower family. We'll also add a little bit of this crachai. The English name for it is finger root, and this comes from the Zingiberaceae family, so it would be related to ginger, galangal, turmeric, things like that. Has a kind of a similar taste to sort of ginger, or a little bit like radishes also. Get some onions in there as well. Time to drain our noodles. And now we'll begin adding the broth. Now let's back up and talk about bone broth for a second. This is homemade. You can see I'm removing about three-fourths of the fat. But if your bone broth is store-bought and it does not gel like this, then it probably does not contain the amount of collagen that you've been led to believe. It should be a jelly-like consistency at room temperature. Well, it should never be room temperature. It should be either cold or hot. Leaving a broth around at room temperature would just grow a lot of bacteria that could be harmful for you. But if you're taking bone broth for collagen, you need to have the type that gels, and you're really only going to get that by making it yourself. Now, of course, it is unknown if collagen-rich foods actually cause your body to increase its own production of collagen. The old saying, "you are what you eat," is a bit of an oversimplification. In the meantime, we'll chop up some perilla and Thai basil for a garnish, get our noodles back in, and once it's all heated up, it's ready to serve. The bone broth I had simmered for about 10 hours and put all together in a noodle dish like this. It turned out great. Quiz time. What kind of tree is this? You might recall from the video released about this time last year, that is Platanus occidentalis, the American sycamore. Let's draw something real quick here. I've got a smallmouth bass started. You can see that this is one of those poses where it's turned, one of those jumping poses where it's turned kind of towards the viewer, a little more difficult of a pose to sketch, but we've got it about right there. That lower set of fins I'm working on, right, that I didn't get that quite right. We'll come back and work on that later. For now, let's establish some shading and some basic details. The light source will be on the left side of the fish, and so the right side will, as you can see, will be in shadow. And we'll just get some details started here. And start in on a color layer as well. Give that a bit of smoothing, looking fairly decent. Need to fix that lower set of fins. But as far as the rest of the pose goes, I think we got it. I think we've got it fairly decent. We'll probably come back to this in another video, finish it up, but that's a decent start, I think.